Call the ordinance committee meeting for Thursday, May 10th. Roll call, Paul Govan.
Here.
Pete Stewart's here. David Key is absent. First thing on the agenda is the food sovereign.
After the last committee meeting, you asked for a simplified version of this, and I reached out to Bernstein Schur, who is the town's attorneys, and asked them if they had any such thing, and he immediately emailed me back this one-page ordinance, which he said covered the was consistent with state statute and covered the it doesn't contain anything else other than that, but and Jeff and I have had some conversations he has some concerns about the simplicity of it and that there's no enforcement mechanism, but the purpose of it is to allow the activity in the community, and the state is still the responsible party for these kind of things. This just allows it.
And that's what we were looking to do, was allow it.
That's the attorney that provided this has provided it to others, but this is it's one page, and it would become an appendix in our I think you said Appendix O, Jeff, would be in our ordinances.
Just as a standalone for under rules, is that what you're saying?
No, it would be part of the ordinance.
Part of the town code under, but a new set, right, yeah.
It'd be easier to find that way if anyone was looking for it, to see if the town allowed it, if it has its own identifier.
Is there anybody here, again, from the new folks that were here last time?
They don't close till 5:30.
Okay.
They're going to be here. This is on the council agenda tonight for the first reading,
okay.
And they will be in attendance then.
Okay. Anything else, Paul? Again, I agree.
Keep it simple.
And your concern was what, Jeff, again? That there wasn't enforcement action?
Well, I've shared my concerns with the town manager. I don't really want to speak any further on it. With all due respect.
Understood. Anything else from any other council members that are here?
Nope, simple.
I guess that's what we were driving at, wasn't it, when we talked about it? Okay. And that is
Well,
on.
it took out the stuff that wasn't legal, and according to the state, and it took out of the model ordinance that had been done by a food group, had a whole preamble in it about entitlement and authority and stuff that.
And this has been vetted by the state. This has been vetted by the state as an attorney that's given it in other towns.
This is no, not to my knowledge. This has been created by an attorney who took the state statute and made the ordinance that didn't include all of this preamble information about communities' rights and towns, people's rights, and all those kind of things. This just simply addresses that.
It says we have it, we can do it.
That Bucksport recognizes the right of these small farmers to do this kind of activity.
And I think that's what we were looking for, right? Okay. Nothing else. Next on the agenda is Appendix B, committee's draft.
There are two sections here. One is the council rules that were in conflict with the town charter, and so there's a section that makes these consistent with the charter, and then there's the section which is the changing your 9 committees to what is essentially the 4 committees with the, and continuing the Economic Development Committee as it sits. Jeff can explain the council, the ones that were in conflict. I think we had talked about.
I know, and I'll just real quick, I know we had changed, one of the changes in here is moving from the last Thursday to the second to fourth Thursday.
That was your recommendation.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that's one of the changes that's coming up. The special meeting one, why is that changed as a notice for 24 hours down to 12?
Because 12 is what's in the charter.
It is, okay. I'll let you go then if you can, I guess I was just, if these are matching.
I don't have to have a copy of that one in front of me.
Okay, I'll go down. On the effective date, we've changed it from 30 to 7.
Again, that's in the charter, yeah. Oh, no, excuse me, that's not, well, that is a charter requirement that was made just recently.
We just to change that,
Yes,
correct? Yes,
right.
yeah. Selection of the chair, it's changed from those present to the council membership.
Again, that reflects charter language.
And forfeiture of office, a member will forfeit his office of member, a member will forfeit his office of member in addition to reasons noted in section 207 of the town charter, which deals with council rules. For failure to attend, we've changed it from 6 to 3 consecutive regular meetings. Is that
Because that's in the charter.
consistent with the charter, correct? And those were the substantive, those were the only changes that were under the rules for Appendix B that were made for changes.
Yeah.
So those are the ones, other than the second and the last, of changing the second and the fourth, that's something we'd asked for. The rest of them match up with what's in the
The
charter.
rest of the changes deal with charter conflicts.
Okay. Questions?
And then the other ones are those 4 committees that you had.
Right. And then the second part of this that we had talked about was the changing of the committee structure down to 4 committees.
It's 4 committees plus economic development, which stays
Which was
basically the way it is now with outside membership as well as internal ones.
And when looking at these, this was sort of a mash of the 2 coming through what, as far as the rules and what the substance was going to be and posting of agendas and things like that. So, and we have the four committees of Finance and Investments Committee. Basically, that is dealing with any of the finance, town budgets, bonds, investments. Services Committee, review matters related to administration, department functions, social and community services, technology appointments, employment and negotiations. Infrastructure and Properties Committee, this review all matters pertaining to public buildings and land, marina, walkways, trails, streets, sewer, water, gas, power, communications, and property acquisitions and disposal. Regulatory Review Committee, this review all matters related to ordinances, town charters, citizen initiatives, rules, policies, and quasi-judicial matters. And again, Community and Economic Development Committee, this review economic matters, comprehensive planning, public events, citizen forums, public relations. Procedure is to have 3, no more than 4 members, I think was one of the things that was talked about. Draft meetings, agendas will be posted for all of the committees available on the website. The committee meeting minutes posted on the website. Non-committee council members attending a committee meeting will have voting rights if they've been present for the entire discussion of an issue, providing that at least 2 of the 3 appointed members of the committee are present. 2 appointed members of the committee shall constitute a quorum. The mayor shall serve as a member of all committees for forum purposes. The mayor can appoint members of the council and/or citizens of the town to special committees authorized by the council, and talks about using Robert's Rules of Order when nothing else is in place. Again, I think this gets us to where we had talked about being. Any questions or anything? Nope. Jim?
Under the present ordinances, it states that the Streets and Roads Committee will have 3 people from the public at large on that committee. will that continue on these new committees?
No, because that committee will disappear, is the way I understand it. We're combining that into, I would assume that would fall under
Comes under the infrastructure.
Infrastructure and properties.
infrastructure, yeah. Anything else?
Looks like everyone will be on 2.
Sure. I assume so. Everybody will have 2 committees?
At least 2 or, and economic development.
Right.
Anyone who wants to.
Now, in this, the little ones like police advisory board and stuff like that.
Those are still in effect, yeah.
This is taking care of this is condensing those 7 committees or 9 committees.
Nine.
9 committees that we had.
Perfect.
That covers other those advisory boards, so recreation, things like that will still continue to be there.
There is another one, it's on my manager's report for tonight, but one of those advisory boards is to the Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities, and Councilor Rabb has resigned as the council representative from that, and so another councilor would need to volunteer for that. We'll be talking about that later, but that's one of those that's got a vacancy at this point.
Okay. Set on that one?
This is on for tonight for first reading.
First reading, right. I think most of these are first readings.
David, he's not
Pretty
here.
sure. All right. Next on the agenda is property maintenance ordinance. This deals with basically creating a new chapter, Jeff, and pulling things out of Chapter 5 to make a Chapter 13 strictly for property maintenance standards. Okay, go ahead.
As you recall, currently in the Town Code, Chapter 5 contains both building standards and property maintenance standards, and the ordinance committee reviewed a proposed change to that chapter that would, in effect, only have building standards in Chapter 5. We took all the property maintenance standards out of Chapter 5 and moved them into this new Chapter 13. We have a few changes and some clarifications made, and a couple of new proposals are also in here too, so I'll go through these if you'd like.
Sure.
The first 5 sections really are just boilerplate requirements that any ordinance has to have: a section, a purpose section, authority, applicability, severability and conflict, and administration. Would you like me to read through those? Or,
Those, looking at what we have in Chapter 5 compared to what you're putting here, those are actually word for word, and those are.
It might be worth just reading the purpose section, because that's unique.
Yep.
That's not from Chapter 5, but it's the purpose of this chapter. So the purpose of this chapter is to provide minimum standards to protect the environment, municipal services, property values, and the health, safety, and welfare of the public insofar as they may be affected by the maintenance of any existing building, structure, or property, and to provide administration and enforcement of those standards. So again, the property maintenance standards that we have now in the Town Code have been in Chapter 5 for at least 18 years, if not longer. So they've been around for quite some time, and they've worked fairly well. There haven't really been any issues that I can recall over the past 18 years about the enforcement of those standards. So I just want to point that out before we get into the nitty-gritty of that. In the administration section, it starts off by saying the CEO shall administer the provisions of the chapter, and the administrative provisions of the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code apply to any permitting that may be required to maintain any building or property. That's reflective of the same language in Chapter 5. Administrative provisions of the MUBEC apply there as well. 5.3 and on are the same language that's already deals with demolition permits. And there's no changes at all in any of that language. That was an amendment we made to Chapter 5 back when AIM was proposing a demolition of the mill property. I can read through them if you like, but there's no changes made in any of those provisions.
Oh, all set with those.
Okay.
Yep.
So Section 6 is where most of the property maintenance standards are located now, and they're broken down into types of standards. The first type deals with water, land, and vegetation. 611, surface water runoff and subsurface drainage from any property must be contained or diverted to the extent necessary to prevent water from entering any public street or sidewalk and causing a public safety hazard, or entering any property or building and flooding or damaging that property or building. Most of this language comes out of section 401.4 in chapter 5. I've added some clarification about water that may enter an abutting property or building and causing damage to that property. I have had complaints from people of that happening, and there's no provision in the ordinance now to deal with that. So this would allow that to be dealt with. A public safety hazard from water entering the street would occur if there's sufficient water flow onto a sidewalk or road and it freezes or floods the road. In those cases, you'd have a public safety hazard. I was questioned the other day from a citizen who asked if they would be prohibited from washing their homes or washing their driveways or cars in their driveways. I think because of that language, but that's absolutely not the case at all. Water running off your driveway onto the street, in that case, would not present a public safety hazard. Uh, 6111, no surface or subsurface water may be drained to the public sewer system. That reflects state requirements in our Chapter 9 sewer ordinance. 612, no fill containing hazardous materials, junk, garbage, or refuse may be deposited on any property except in a landfill licensed to accept such fill. That reflects state law. It's not a provision in our property maintenance standard now. I'm suggesting we add that just for clarification, because I have had situations where that's happening in town and haven't been able to do anything about it. 6121, disturbed soils must be stabilized in accordance with best management practices for erosion and sedimentation control. That reflects state law and our land use ordinance. 613, open shafts, wells, tanks, and other subterranean cavities that present a fall hazard must be removed, filled, covered, barricaded, or otherwise protected to prevent a public safety risk.
So any of these that pertain to state law, who enforces those?
If it's in your local ordinance, it will be locally enforced.
If it's not,
So good luck getting enforced by the state. They're very short-handed, and actually regarding the fill, I was informed by a state official of a complaint they received, and they asked the town to address it. They're just so overworked now that they don't have the time or manpower to deal with all these things, so they expect the town to help out. The one I just read, 613, is also proposed. It's a public safety issue, not addressed currently in our property maintenance standards. 614, storm damage, diseased, or dead trees that are at risk of causing structural damage on an abutting property or that are a public safety hazard must be removed to the extent necessary to eliminate the risk or hazard. Removal of vegetation in any shoreland district is subject to compliance with the applicable provisions in Appendix K of the Bucksport Town Code. This is also new language. We had a significant amount of storm-damaged trees a while ago, most of which were taken care of, but some were not. There wasn't much that could be done in terms of requiring these trees to be removed that posed a public safety hazard. This language would help out quite a bit in that area.
So we're adding, if it doesn't pose a threat, right?
A public safety hazard.
Public safety hazard.
Mm-hmm.
We're adding something so we can enforce it?
If you have a storm damaged or diseased or dead tree that poses a public safety hazard.
Then we already have something in place to take care of that.
No, I'll point out when the language I'm reading is already in the ordinance. This one here is proposed. There's nothing in the ordinance now that addresses dealing with storm damaged trees.
The only way that, under this proposed language, is that if a storm-damaged or diseased tree posed a threat to public safety or to somebody else's property, and a butter's property would be the only way that there could be any, and I mean, it's not just any tree that cut.
Where is public safety hazard defined? I couldn't find it. Do we have a definition of that?
There's no definition.
So it's whose interpretation?
My fear on something like that is without having a proper definition on what whose eyes is a public safety hazard. I get concerned if we don't. I like black and whites. I don't like grays. I've dealt a lot in my world with grays, and sometimes it can get you in trouble. But if we're gonna have rules that we're enforcing, and person A calls up and what's that threshold? I guess what would determine that threshold?
I think I can answer your question later on when we get into the section that deals with nuisance conditions. That, I think, better defines what constitutes a safety risk. But it's not a definition, it's just it's language that helps the code officer identify a risk to public safety that needs to be dealt with. So we can talk more about that when we get to that section. But we can come back to this if you want to.
Yeah, I'm and I don't know if I'm the only one, but I have.
You're seeing somebody getting upset for a branch hanging over when...
I guess I just don't know where the line is, and that those concern me. That I think you're going to end up. I think we're going to end up getting more complaints on what is and isn't, then the enforcement action is going to be worth doing.
This I've had over the years. I've had people call me, complain about trees that they think were at risk of falling and doing damage to their property. Mm-hmm. And the best I've been able to tell them is, unfortunately, there's nothing the town can do. It's a civil matter, as you'd have to deal with it through
That's
court.
a great idea, in my opinion. That's a perfect idea. Because it is, I mean, me telling someone what they can do with their property, I have a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, that's one scenario, but the other scenario is if you have a heavy storm event that partially brings down trees that look very easily like they're going to fall into a public way and do damage to vehicles or pedestrians. That's something that can be identified by public safety officials and dealt with through this ordinance, or dealt through state law, I suppose. I think the fire department, the police department, I think, have the ability to deal with that. But this is just another way to.
I am more concerned of adding rule on top of rule. If there's already a state law, my thought is, if the state can't handle it, then we have a recourse to the folks in town that, and if it's passing the buck or if it's what it's just doing, but we start going on top of what state law is and being a state law enforcer. I don't know if it sound right, but I'm getting concerned of if the rules are already there, why are we making it more onerous to the folks that are there? I guess is that making sense?
Let me just add to this. In our land use ordinance now, we have a whole section that was adopted to reflect DEP standards that were updated a couple of years ago to deal specifically with storm damage and disease and dead trees in shoreline zones. So there's language in our town code right now that deals with handling those matters in shoreline zones. This language here would make it town-wide. And to me, that's being consistent. If you're charged with the responsibility of dealing with this issue in shoreline zones, why not town-wide?
Shoreline zones are different than townwide anyway. Stuff I do on Jacob, well, I'm actually in a shoreline zone, but something someone does on Bucks Mills Road, not in a shoreline zone, they can do different things than someone can in a shoreline zone. So comparing the two, they're not even comparable because they're two different zones.
But the issue I'm talking about, though, is the same, exactly the same. You're dealing with trees that pose a public safety hazard. There's language now in our town code that deals with that in shoreline zones. This language here would, again, make it applicable statewide, townwide, excuse me. We can put an asterisk on this one if you'd like to, just
Please.
so we can move on. 615, this language is proposed because, again, I've received complaints from citizens about properties that have been abandoned in town because of foreclosures or whatever the case may be. People walk away from properties and allow their nicely landscaped properties just to grow up into a jungle. And it's causing concern to neighbors who continue to maintain their properties. So this language is an attempt to address that concern. There's no way to address it now. Vegetated landscaping is not required to be maintained, except that no vegetated landscaping in the compact area may be uncared for to the extent that a public safety concern is identified by the CEO for any of the following reasons. Number one, overgrown vegetation has become a fire risk to buildings or structures. Number two, overgrown vegetation has become a habitat or cover for wildlife that may cause injury, disease, or property damage. And number three, overgrown vegetation provides cover for unauthorized use or illegal activity. There won't be too many situations, I don't think, where this section would be enforceable, but when somebody comes to me with a complaint about uncared for properties, there's absolutely nothing I can do.
Right, but
to help them.
They're coming in reference to foreclosed properties, right? For the most part. 9 out of 10 is a foreclosed property.
And I could reach out to the bank or mortgage company that governs that, but there's no guarantee they're going to reply, and often don't. Sometimes they don't reply.
Right,
So what would you do?
How we're going to spend time to enforce something that we can't enforce with anybody. I mean, that's the issue I have with something like I understand that, okay, because it looks gross. Okay, we have them in town. We have them in about every town has them.
It's not looks related at all. Looks are not an issue. Aesthetics is not something that can be identified as a public safety concern. It has to do with public safety, protecting public safety. The complaint I've been receiving is from vermin that find these overgrown patches of grass and woody vegetation to provide cover for them, and they come out and go over to the neighbor's property and cause damage. That's the biggest concern I'm getting. And this is the only way I can think of to deal with this.
But what are you going to do with that, the bank that owns it and won't respond? Where do you take it? Where would we as a town take it? Are we going to... What exactly are we going to do?
If it rises to that level where it's an issue that's so egregious that an enforcement action becomes necessary, then the only recourse then would be to take the matter to court to deal with it with council authorization. As I said, this ordinance, this language is here. It's not in our ordinance now, but it's in here because of the possibility that something so egregious could happen that we need to do something about it. And there's not much we can do right now. By the way, it just pertains to properties in the compact area, not the bulk of the town, just the compact area. But I'll put an asterisk on this too. I'm sensing there's some reservation about that one, but we can maybe make a decision about that after we finish reviewing the entire ordinance. 6.2, there was language that was drafted to deal with the maintenance of private roads. I left the section in there, but I did not include the language because I wanted to discuss this with the committee to see if you believe, again, public safety might warrant some provisions to ensure that public safety officials can respond to a 911 call in a timely manner. There have been occasions where there have been ambulance calls down along dirt roads that have been difficult to maneuver because of the conditions of the road. The fire chief was supportive of the draft language, but I decided not to put it in here for the time being. I just wanted to get some sense from this committee if you think it's important enough to protect the public by having some language that requires you to maintain your private roads.
It's not protecting the public.
What's that?
It's not protecting the public.
It's protecting the person that could be affected.
Right, it would be protecting the fire and the police. They're not the public. Public shouldn't be on my private road. I don't have a private road, but, so we're doing it, this would be to protect the employees, city employees. They'd be on that public road. Or that
Private road.
Private road.
Well, it has to do with response time. That's the issue with poorly maintained roads is once the fire vehicle or the ambulance gets on that road, they have to slow down. And I've heard that there have been instances where an ambulance actually got stuck on the road, brought them to a dead halt. And fortunately, there was no loss of life in that case there, but it could very well be a loss of life if your forward progress is suddenly stopped because you hit a muddy patch of the road or ruts you couldn't get over. That happens. So I'm not suggesting, as I said, there's no language in here to address that unless you'd like to consider some language, and we can bring some back to you for that.
Right now, there is none in the proposal.
So I'm looking at the folks that live on the upper Long Pond Road, that are on those two places far out. From the transfer station out, that's a private road, correct?
It's a public easement.
From the sludge dump out all the way?
It's a public easement. It's not maintained by the town. It's a public easement, though. Public is right.
Who, if we, and I'm just playing a what if, who would be responsible for the maintenance of that all the way out to those two residences, those folks that live out there? Because there's no way in heck you can get an ambulance out there in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, I mean that would have to be ironed out as to how you require roads to be maintained. Who's responsible for that? That would all have to be worked out.
Let's skip over this one, okay?
Yeah. 6.3, outdoor storage. This is a whole group of standards that are currently in our property maintenance standards. 6.3.1, no unserviceable, discarded, worn out, or junked motor vehicle or vehicle parts may be stored outside on any property in the compact area. That's from section 401.3. 6.3.2, no more than 2 unserviceable, discarded, worn out, or junked motor vehicles may be stored outside on any property outside the compact area except in a licensed automobile graveyard. That's from 401.3. 6.3.3, no accumulation of discarded, worn out, or junked items may be allowed outside on any property except in a licensed junkyard. Discarded, worn out, or junked items include any physical objects that are no longer maintained for their intended purpose and which are rotting or rusting or otherwise in a state of decay, disintegration, delamination, deformation, degradation, damage, or deterioration. That's from 404.1 with a little detail added. The last sentence I just read is added for detail. 6.3.4, no mobile home may be permanently stored on any property. A mobile home is considered permanently stored if it remains on a property for 1 year without being permitted and approved for occupancy. That's from section 308.4. The second sentence is added to clarify what being permanently stored means. 6.3.5, all refuse and garbage must be stored in a sanitary manner in closed bags, cans, or receptacles with covers, or in structures or containers intended for waste storage. That's from 404.2. 6.3.5.1, refuse or garbage may not be stored in any manner or quantity that causes the attraction of animals or emits foul odor. That's also from section 404.2. Waste containers may not be filled over capacity. That's proposed new language. 6.3.6, waste containers in the compact area may not be emptied or moved on or off site by a commercial hauler between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. on any day. That's from section 404.4. 6.3.7, waste containers contracted for regular waste disposal must be screened from ordinary view by pedestrians on the waterfront walkway and by pedestrians and motorists on Main Street or Route 1. This requirement applies to one or more container with a total or combined volume of 1 cubic yard or greater. That's from section 404.3. 6.3.7.1, screening may be provided by Number 1, natural or altered topographical features such as hills, gullies, or embankments that are stable and vegetated. Number 2, vegetation such as trees and shrubs that effectively provide screening at all times. Number 3, stone, brick, or concrete walls. Or number 4, buildings, fencing, or other structures except motor vehicles, box trailers, and similar structures. That's from 4 or 4.3 with a little, a few more details added for clarity. 6372. All buildings, fences, and structures providing screening in accordance with Section 6371 must be structurally sound, free of rot and decay, and properly maintained. That's new language proposed. 6373, all fencing utilized for screening must be designed and installed to resist damage from the force of wind and to remain stable and plumb in frozen soil. That's new language proposed. 6374, the exterior surface of fencing utilized for screening must be uniform in appearance and comprised of materials customarily used for fence installations. The material used may be wood, metal, vinyl, composite, stone, or masonry. For the purpose of this section, exterior surface means the side facing a street or an abutting property. That's new language proposed. Any questions on that section? All right, 6.4 deals with buildings and structures. 641, all buildings and structures and appurtenances attached thereto must be maintained in good repair and free of defects, dilapidation, and decay. That's from section 402.1. 642, all vacant structures must be secured to the extent necessary to prevent unauthorized entry. That's new language proposed. 643, no building intended for human occupancy may have any opening that allows the entry of wild animals into or under the building. That's from section 402.6. 644, no exterior wall may remain without finished siding for more than 6 months. That's from section 303.4. There's a change, though, in the original language. The time length allowed is 1 year. I can change that back to 1 year if you prefer. But this language proposes just 6 months to allow a building to remain without finished siding.
If it was the year before, why change it? In my opinion, sorry.
Is that the wish of the committee?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the same would apply to the next session for finished roofing.
Yeah, that,
One of the reasons why a shorter time period was allowed is because underlayment products often don't last a year. They start ripping under the force of wind and UV degradation in a fairly short time, so you end up having properties that look like they're falling apart. Tarps covering roofs, those don't last that long either. But
we, you know, a lot of this stuff, and you said we've had a couple examples, but I'm wondering why we're trying to reinvent the wheel here and change a lot of this stuff. If we've already got it in place, and you know, I don't see where we have a huge issue in town where this stuff is happening. What's the impetus for trying to change all this stuff? I don't see rules.
I'm trying to agree that there's a lot of changes being proposed. I'm citing sections.
I understand. I'm just wondering why are we making it harder on ourselves? And if we've already had the rules in place, why not just transfer those into the new section?
Well, part of the update is to provide clarity and reorganization, and so by breaking it down into sections.
And I can understand clarity and reorganization. I don't want to change the rules if the rules are working and they've worked for 18 years, like you said when we started. I don't want to start adding new stuff that's going to that I don't see where we have an issue with. Is I guess where I'm trying to.
Well, I've heard you express concern about two things so far. Are there other things too that you're concerned about that you haven't spoken?
We haven't got through them all. I mean, there's I'm going through and seeing what you referenced, what we did, and things like that. I just, changing it from 6 months to a year. I just want to know.
Well, I explain why I suggested 6 months because of the reason that.
And all I'm saying, Jeff, is I don't want to make it any harder on anybody in the room. That's.
So I perfectly understand. We can stick with 1 year. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, I think what he's saying is, why didn't we take what was in our policy or our ordinance before and draft this new policy? Instead of we're adding, but we're adding restrictions. I think, if I'm not, I think that's what he means, and I agree. If we've had an ordinance that's worked, we're reorganizing, all about reorganizing. But if we have ordinances that work and the language has worked for however many years, why do we change them? Why do we add?
Well, as I explained earlier, in some cases I've received complaints that I've not been able to help citizens deal with because of the lack of language in the property maintenance sections of the town
Right,
code.
but a couple of those are instances that actually the state should be helping, not us.
In a perfect world, that would be great, but they don't. But anyway, let's can we move on to finish this out before we run out of time?
Yep.
6451. No roof on a building in the compact area may be finished or refinished with wood roofing material. An existing roof finished with wood roofing material may be repaired with like material. That's section 303.1. And by the way, if any of these existing provisions, now we're reading them aloud, if you think that they're too restrictive, by all means speak up. There's no reason why.
And I appreciate that some of them you didn't include, going down through the stuff that was in...
Some wasn't necessary.
Exactly, and that's why I think this is a good process to go through this. I don't think it needs to be more, and I hate to say it, more detailed than what it needs to be, what was in here, because it worked. But continue, please.
Let's see, where was I?
646.
646. All interior surface must be kept in good repair, clean, and free of mold and chipping or flaking lead-based paint. Asbestos-containing material must be maintained to the extent necessary to prevent the release of asbestos fibers into the air. 403.1 addresses that to some extent, but I've added some clarification and some language that addresses, again, public safety, public health concerns. 6461, all removal of lead-based paint and asbestos-containing material must be conducted in accordance with state law. That's a given. But again, having it in our ordinance helps to deal with situations that might come up where lead-based paint is not being properly handled, or asbestos, friable asbestos.
Right, but if it's a state law, it doesn't have to be in our ordinance. If it's a state law, it's a state law, period. It doesn't have to be in our ordinance. We can still address it. But I'm fine with that. I mean, but I'm just saying, having it, I understand what you mean, but if it's a state law, it's a state law. Whether it's in our ordinance or not, we can enforce it.
But having it in a local ordinance, too, helps to become more familiar, help the citizens of the town become more familiar that indeed there is some language here, that some regulations that you need to pay attention to. 647, all exits and secondary means of escape for a building must be kept clear of obstructions and in operating condition. That's out of life safety code, but it fits well here because it deals with property maintenance. 648, all required lighting must be maintained in operating condition. That's out of 405.1. All mechanical, heating, ventilation, and electrical equipment installations must be maintained in operating condition. That's from 407.1. All chimneys, smokestacks, and similar appurtenances must be maintained structurally safe and sound and in good repair. That's from section 402.1. 6492, no exhaust fan may be vented into an attic or through an eave soffit panel. That's from 405.2. With a little clarification, the language about through an eave soffit panel is put in there because it reflects a requirement in the building code that's often misunderstood. I'll see it quite frequently where people ventilate bath exhaust fans into their soffit vent because the soffit vent is ventilated. So I think that's a great way to get that warm, moist air out of your home. It's a horrible way to do it, though, because a lot of that warm, moist air goes right back up through those soffit vents into your attic where it condenses and causes mold and deterioration over time. And it's against code. 6410, all plumbing and septic system installations must be maintained in a sanitary and operating condition. That's from 406.1. 6411 through 14 are added language, but they seem to fit into the theme of this section. All smoke and carbon monoxide detectors must be maintained in operating condition. All sprinkler systems must be maintained in operating condition. All fire alarm systems must be maintained in operating condition. All radon mitigation systems must be maintained in operating condition.
I have an issue with those just for the simple fact that if I buy an existing building and the system, or I don't want to, I shut my system off in my house, of a sprinkler system. I don't think that I should be required to have, if I don't want to have that myself as a sprinkler system, I don't think I should be required by ordinance by the town to maintain that.
If it's a sprinkler system required by code,
This is one, but it doesn't say that. This just says all. And that's where I think we get into trouble, that if we say all, that, to me, that's required or not required. And if I don't want to put a smoke detector in my house, am I required to put a smoke detector in my house?
by code, yes,
Or
you are.
radon detector?
No, radon, the section on radon would be addressed most likely in a multifamily occupancy where there are known high levels of radon that the tenants are exposed to, and the landlord decides to not operate the mitigation system. Tenants complain about that. That language will allow this town to address that.
But it also allows, if I have it in my own personal house, it allows enforcement.
That's extremely unlikely.
I understand that, Jeff, but a lot of these are extremely unlikely. You know, we talk about the tarp on the roof. That's a 1 in 1,000 houses here, but it happens. And I get concerned when we use words like all and we put these things in here when, you know, if I don't have that, or if I don't operate my sprinkler system in my house, by the letter of this, I'm in violation. I don't think that's the intent of what we're trying to do. I absolutely agree. If somebody has a multifamily house and it's required, or it has an operating sprinkler system, by all means, for public safety, yes. But if I have that in my own house and I decide I don't want to turn the water on anymore and have that run, I don't think. And by having words like all and things like that, I get concerned that, you know, I'm subject to those rules.
Well, perhaps there's one word missing in these sections that would help you clarify the intent of this, and that's the word required. The word required after all would, I think...
And yeah, if places are required to have this by code, by law, whatever the case is, then...
So if I add the word required after the word all, would that satisfy you? All required sprinkler systems, all required fire alarms, all required... So that,
You just say that it's required for houses to have smoke alarms in the...
By code.
Just said
By code it is. That's, yeah.
Smoke detector.
It's all required, so how are they going to tell whether or not I have a smoke detector in my house?
If you don't let them in, they're not.
I mean, again, it's one of those things where they have to come in, and there has to be a reason to come in, and all of a sudden that's a known thing. I'm not going to come knocking on your door and say, let me check your fire extinguishers, if that's for smoke detectors.
those issues would likely be discovered one of two ways. Either you have a fire in your home, or you're making a change to your home that requires a building permit.
This isn't.
Nobody's going around to inspect single-family homes to see if your detectors are being maintained.
But I think by having the language of required, because there are certain buildings and instances where it is required.
Yeah, smoke and carbon, those are definitely required. Sprinkler systems are required by code in certain occupancies. And fire alarms also are required in certain occupancies. Radon mitigation would only be required, as I said earlier, if you have high levels
In a multifamily.
Yeah.
But if you go into a single-family house and you see the radon system's not on, are they in violation then?
Well, that wouldn't be required, then, would it? There's no code that
I think that's what I was trying to get at, that if it's not required, then if we put in the language that if it's a required use, I think that's where my concern was.
Yep.
Section 7 is demolition standards. There's absolutely no changes proposed in that other than just renumbering the sections. Unless you'd like me to, I don't feel I need to read through those.
And this is one that we kind of just redid.
This was change made to deal with the AIM demolition primarily.
And there are no changes from what I saw either.
No, the language is exactly the same, just renumbering.
Actually, when you did this, you made it so that John Q. Citizen could do
We gave it a little bit more. Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
The exemptions for demolition permits is dealt with earlier on. We kind of skipped over that, but there are exceptions for permits to do demolitions. And those weren't changed. Section 8 is a new section that's proposed, and before I read through it, I would like to hopefully I sent this section to the to fire chief to get his thoughts on it, and he's not here tonight, I don't think, but he replied by email, and this is what he said about Section 8, safety inspections. Jeff, I completely agree with these proposals. After a number of serious and even fatal fires in these units in Maine over the last few years, and the fact that the owners and landlords have been convicted of numerous different violations and criminal offenses, it would be to everyone's benefit, but especially the tenants and first responders. That's what the fire chief has to say about this, which briefly is a section that requires inspections of multifamily occupancies once every 5 years. So 8.1. All buildings containing 3 or more dwelling units or 2 or more dwelling units and a commercial occupancy shall be subject to a full building safety inspection conducted jointly by the Code Enforcement Office and Fire Department at least once every 5 years. The purpose of the inspection is to verify compliance with the applicable provisions of this chapter and Chapter 5 building codes and standards that affect the safety of multiple tenant occupancies. 8.1.1. A full building safety inspection shall include all common areas of the building, the interior of all dwelling units, basements, utility rooms, and accessible attics. 8.2. A full building safety inspection shall be scheduled with the property owner or their property management agent at least 30 days before the date of inspection. The building owner or their agent must be present during the inspection. 8.3. Building owners shall be provided with a written inspection report of a safety inspection. If any violation is identified, the report shall describe the expected actions to be taken and the time allowed for the actions to be taken. Follow-up inspections may be arranged to ascertain that expected actions have been taken. So I went through and tallied up how many multifamily properties we have in town, and combined with the commercial occupancies that have 2 or more apartments in them, we have 64 properties that this would impact, 64 properties. And a total of approximately 379 individual dwelling units would be affected by this language. Once I did that tally, I'm not sure 5 years is sufficient enough time. That would average about one building a month that would need to be done to get through a 5-year cycle. If you have 64 properties, there's 60 months in 5 years. So about one a month would need to be done. That might be a little bit too much for the fire department to deal with. So if you are receptive to this idea of requiring safety inspections, we might want to extend it out a little bit more than 5 years.
My only issue is when you do that, we're losing that continuity. I agree, safety inspection. I think a report ought to go to all the tenants. That if you find violations, the tenants ought to be notified also that if they have some recourse they can take. But if we start spreading this out over 10 years, 15 years, what are we catching? If we're going to do it, then let's do it correct or not do it all. I think 5 years is more than enough time.
You're okay with 5 years?
I am, and I think that, and I agree with Craig when he says that all too often, and I think it's, you can not have to look very far back in records of news reports that we have people that are dying, and I think public safety on something like this is to make sure that we do have people that are maintaining their properties where their people are living, and if they aren't up to code, then I'd hand a piece of paper to the tenant in apartment 1 and say, here you go, this is what you're living in. So I don't think you should go any more than 5 years, and I think we get it done. I think once because I think we got to make sure that the language and all the things we talked about are correct with what we're looking at. I know we've had some questions and some comments on making some changes, but I think anytime we have almost 400 citizens living in something that they're putting their trust in somebody else to live, I think it is incumbent upon us in public safety in the town.
It's well more than 400 people. It's 400 units.
Okay.
It could be occupied by families.
So you could have 1,000 folks up there.
I don't know how many people are involved there, but there's certainly more than 400.
Yeah, so where I stand, I think it's something that should be done, and I think it's if you're doing it right, it's not going to take. You shouldn't have any violations. You should be able to have. I'm going to rent a place. You should be able to know that you're living in a safe environment, and if you're not, let's fix it.
All right, so you want to leave the language in there as it is?
I do. I don't know what anybody else is thinking here, but I think this is one of those, when everything we're talking about here is public safety hazards and everything else, to me, this is, somebody living in Florida renting out a place and they're not taking care of it, but yet they're charging $1,000 a month for folks living there. If they're not keeping their place up to code where these folks should be safe in their environment, then bad on us. We're in all charge of our own houses. It's on us. We ought to make sure that if somebody's renting off somebody else, they ought to be able to be safe in there.
So it kind of touches on what Paul mentioned, though, about ensuring that when you call 911, they can get to you. That's about public safety as well. It's not,
and again, I'm not going to go down the idea of somebody renting a house on the East Boxborough Road out in the middle of the North 40, someplace down on, on the backside of Long Pond. If they're renting that,
They've made that decision to leave it longer.
There are certain things that we just can't legislate all the way through. We can't have everybody have a 20-foot paved road to a place that's 30 miles off the beaten path on the backside of a pond someplace. So,
well, see, we're adopting, proposing these safety inspections to ensure that we do it now instead of waiting till we have a fatality.
Correct.
And the reason why we're talking about road standards is for the very same reason, to do it now before we have a fatality, because we couldn't get there in time to save the patient.
For those places that are multi-occupancy residences off the beaten trail, can you name one that we have? And in order then,
the Strickland Ridge Road is a road that ambulances had difficulty getting.
He's talking multifamily.
Multifamily, off the beaten path.
Yeah, something that we're going to inspect. We're going to go inspect these places. And I guess if nothing else, Jeff, to me, it's a folks. Just so you know, up front, we had to walk in here. So if you still want to live here, the ambulance may not be able to get in here. We're going to give you the what's what I'm looking for, advice. We're going to give you this under advisement that you're living here. Everything else is up to snuff except your road sucks. And I don't want to go down the road where we're mandating somebody's driveway to get to these. I think if nothing else, we give them advice and saying, look, we had to walk in 100 yards to get here. Just so you know, everything else is up to snuff, but the ambulance has to get here. You never know. So,
well, because we're dealing with property maintenance standards, this is a perfect time to have that discussion, and appreciate your considering the possibility of doing that.
Jim, do you have a question?
Yeah, just how long is it going to be before you start doing this in people's private homes, not multi-dwelling?
We're not. As long as I'm sitting here, we're not going to. So, I'm just. Yeah.
I understand if you have a absentee owner and you have a 3, 4, 5 family home, I can understand it. But what about owner-occupied homes? I mean, this doesn't affect me. I only have 2 apartments, mine and the one upstairs. But what about owner-occupied homes? Are we going to be, they have a kind of stake in there. They live there, I mean, are we worried about them the same as you'd be worried about a landlord that isn't even in the area?
No, you're absolutely right.
As I said, it doesn't affect me, but I'm just bringing up the point, that's all. I mean, nobody wants the town to be able to come in and inspect their home anytime they want, and And
it wouldn't be any time. This is once every 5 years. I mean, this isn't coming.
Some of these regulations, your neighbor doesn't like you, let's say. We're just giving our neighbor something to go to the town, use the town to attack their neighbor. I mean, that's a point.
And that's what I'm looking at, Mike. I mean, some of this stuff, like I said, a lot of this stuff was already here, and we've dealt with it for 18 years.
Yep.
And that's when I was looking.
Fully happy.
When I was looking at all this,
over from where it was and leave it alone. Don't add to it. That's my point.
The safety inspections deal with multi-family occupancies and commercial occupancies that have 2 or more dwellings. We have a few of those on Main Street. We've got several multi-family occupancies around town. But
how many of those are owner-occupied? Do you know?
Well, multi-family is, by definition, it's a rental occupancy.
Yeah, but that's not always the case. Like, isn't there one up on Mechanic where the people live in it? That 3-unit?
I don't know.
Just down from the school? What is that?
He has a good point, you know.
Well, if you clarified, you could say all non-owner occupied
I guess that's what, thank you. I'm not very
buildings
smart with
containing
words.
3 or more.
I'm not very smart with words, thank you, that's what I was looking for.
Oh, no, I mean that.
I absolutely agree. Again, I'm looking at public safety, and I'm talking to the guy that I said earlier is living in Florida, renting out places, and doesn't give, see it in all kinds of different towns.
Hasn't
You're
been
absolutely-
here in 3 years.
So,
Just cashes the check.
and again, we're not coming in every time. That's why, if it's once every 5 years for these folks that aren't here, I think it's actually incumbent upon us to kind of make sure
If the
that.
owner doesn't live there,
Correct.
it's a business.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
You expect more intrusions on a business than you do on your private home.
I don't like that word, but yeah. Thank you. I have a question back there, Bruce. Do you have a question?
It wasn't to do with this, it was with some of the other stuff,
Okay.
when we get to that section,
Yep.
I guess. So.
Okay.
So you want to add clarity in the section that specifies that the building is not owner-occupied?
Correct. Okay. Correct. That's, I think, the intent of what we're looking to do is that somebody that, if I got a vested interest because I'm living downstairs and I'm renting it to 3 people upstairs, I'm going to make damn sure that the smoke detectors are working and everything else.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, again, I don't want to make this any more onerous. I want to make the intent to be able to fix the issue that's there and not make it any more harder than everything else. Thank you.
Section 9 deals with nuisances. That's dealt with in Section 601 in the current code. 9.1, a building, structure, or property that's in violation of any provision of this chapter is deemed to be a nuisance. A building, structure, or property identified as a nuisance is deemed to be a dangerous nuisance if it poses a risk of incapacitating injury or death for any person. 911, the CEO may determine that a risk of incapacitating injury or death exists if any of the following conditions is present or imminent. Number 1, a structural failure. Number 2, an explosion. Number 3, a fire. Number 4, a fire-damaged structure. Number 5, an electrical hazard. Number 6, poisonous contamination or biological infection of water, air, or the physical environment. Number 7, a precipitous fall hazard. And number 8, catastrophic damage. Nine 9.2, any identified nuisance condition is subject to enforcement in accordance with the provisions of Section 10. And Section 10 is the enforcement section. This is reflective of the enforcement section in Chapter 5. Comes out of 501.2. The only change is, well, first of all, Section 10.2 is new. It just clarifies how a CEO can enter a property legally to address a nuisance condition. That language is not present currently in the ordinance. And essentially it's saying you need permission from the property owner before you enter a property. And if you can't get permission, then you have to actually get an inspection warrant from the court. And 10.3 just outlines what a formal enforcement action includes. The document has to include certain provisions, and that's consistent with current requirements. 10.4 identifies that the notice of violation shall be delivered by first-class U.S. mail. Currently it says first-class U.S. mail and certified mail. Certified mail certainly gives you the evidence. If they accept delivery, it gives you evidence that they've received the notice, but so does U.S. first-class mail. If it's not returned, then I'm told by attorneys that the court will accept that as evidence that they were served with a notice of violation by first-class mail. I have found in the past that by complying with the current requirements of sending it out by both certified and first class, the certified is returned. So you've spent $7 or $8 for nothing because they don't accept. They read the first class mail and don't bother to take the certified. Some people don't take certified at all anyway, so it comes back more often than not. And if it does come back, the recourse is to have it delivered by a local law enforcement officer or by a sheriff in accordance with the main rules of civil procedure. 10.5, it doesn't specify how much time is allowed. It's typically 30 days, but there might be some situations where less time is justifiable to deal with an issue that needs to be taken care of rather quickly. And as currently provided for, an extension can be allowed if a reasonable hardship can be shown. 10.6 reflects existing requirements that the CEO can order occupants of any building or property that is seen to be a dangerous nuisance to immediately vacate the building and not return until it's approved for occupancy. That's reflective of current provision in Chapter 5. The posting of a notice is also consistent with current requirements. 10.6.2, if action is not taken as ordered by the CEO shall cause the building or property to be secured. The only difference between this language and what's in the ordinance now is that it allows the owner 5 days to deal with a dangerous nuisance condition. In some cases that might be okay, but in other cases you might want to see something happen more quickly because of the extent of the danger to the public safety. So I didn't put any time frame in here. That would be a judgment call made by the CEO as to whether 2 days is needed or 10 days is okay. It's a decision made by the code officer. And then 10.6.3 about repaying all expenses incurred by the town, that's in our current ordinance. If they don't repay, a special tax can be assessed against the property. 10.7, in the event that a building demolition is ordered by the CEO and the owner fails to comply with the demolition order, the town council can take action. In accordance with Title 7, Section 2851, that's the dangerous building statute. The town council can actually go to court and ask for a judgment against the property with an order to demolish the building. And 10.8 just clarifies that the town attorney, with the assistance of the CEO, can take an enforcement action to court when authorized to do so by municipal officers. Any questions on that section? Next one deals with appeals. In our current ordinance, there's an appeal section, but the only recourse for a citizen to take an appeal is to go directly to Superior Court. This language allows an appeal to be taken to the local Board of Appeals. An administrative appeal from any decision, action, or non-action of the CEO can be taken to the Bucksport Board of Appeals, except that a notice of violation may not be appealed. That reflects the same limitation in Chapter 5.
And the reason we didn't put the Superior Court back in there is...
Well, you might have a property owner who's unhappy with a relatively minor issue that was brought to their attention by the code officer. Currently now the only recourse is to spend a lot of money. They've hired an attorney.
But they still can do that, correct?
They would need to first go through the local appeal process. Once you establish a local appeal process, then that has to happen first. If they're unhappy with the Board of Appeals decision, then yes, they would take it to court.
It doesn't say that in here.
And we're putting everything else in here. Can we put that back in here too, just so folks can understand that they also have a right to go to court? And we're talking about putting everything here so they can understand it, but yet we got to take that out. And
okay, I'll add that.
thank you.
Yeah. Section 12 is a section that's not in the ordinance right now. It's a waiver section. It's in the proposed Chapter 5 amendments, which you went through and approved. There's a waiver provision, and it's the same provisions here. Exactly. I'm going to suggest we add something when you get down through it. The CEO may grant a waiver of any specific requirement of this chapter, provided that no waiver has the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the comprehensive plan and this chapter. Number 2, extraordinary and unnecessary hardships may result from the strict compliance with a requirement or there are special circumstances of a particular plan. And number 3, the health, safety, and welfare of the public are protected. And the CEO may set conditions to any granted waiver as necessary to protect the purposes of the chapter. What we have on the other waiver section is what can't be waived. And I didn't put it in here, but I think it should be. Permits should not be waivable. Fees should not be waivable. And any town council requirements that are applicable in this chapter should not be waivable. that would be the requirement of a bond or letter of credit.
And that's what we have in Chapter 5, correct?
Yes.
The knots?
Yes.
Can we just match that up with this
Yes.
language here, just to make sure that we're all...
And then section 13, the last section, deals with definitions. There aren't any.
Can we add one?
What would you like to add?
What's the definition of
Public safety hazard.
public safety hazard? Because that's quoted in here quite often,
Yeah.
and there's no answer to it. There needs to be an answer to it.
Well, if you go back to section 9, which talks about nuisances, this is really where you identify public safety hazards, and 911 lists those things that could constitute a public safety hazard. Structural failure, explosion, fire, and so forth. Those are all things that are there because they would constitute a public safety hazard if they existed or they were imminent.
I'm fine with that, but then it needs to be in a definition of what that means, because we quote a public safety hazard in this policy, and nowhere does it say what a public safety hazard is. I'm fine with your definition of it, because I agree with that.
I'll just put it in. I'll put it in
It needs to be there
section
because-
13. That's doable. So we've gone through the entire proposed chapter. Did you want to go back and revisit some things that you were a little concerned about?
I think, some of the things that we talked about as far as inspections,
You were hesitant about section 614 and
I was
615.
trying to figure out where it was.
Page
There it was,
4.
yeah. The trees,
Trees and vegetated landscape.
I mean, under this, I got one on the back side of my property that fell down. Do I have to get rid of it?
Doesn't pose a public safety hazard when it's on the ground.
I don't think so. Go ahead, Mr. Ormsby.
So my thought is with that too, is if you have, who's going to assess whether or not it's a public safety hazard? Do they have to hire an arborist to come in and tell you the trees, or is that going to be charged by us, the town, or how do we know that the tree's rotting or it's got mold on it,
It's going to be a case where you have visible evidence showing you've got a tree trunk that's split down the middle, and one huge section of it is leaning precariously over a neighbor's house or whatever.
I'm very big on, I talk to my neighbor, we make something happen, without the town getting involved. I think we get involved in, that's just something that in our present policy we're not involved in. That would be civil. Right.
If a neighbor's tree does damage to your property, then the public safety risk is over. Then it's happened. The accident has happened, and then your recourse is to file suit to claim damages. If you called me up and said, my neighbor's tree is dangerously close to falling on my house, and I'm worried about that, the only recourse you have in this case now is to talk to your neighbor. That's why I say that, talk to your neighbor and see if you can work something out. But if you can't do that, then you have to hire an attorney. Go for it. With this language here, you have a code officer that would
become the attorney?
attempt to, no, if I received a complaint, if this language was adopted and I received a complaint about a storm-damaged tree that somebody's worried was about to fall on their home, and I went out and looked at it, and it didn't appear to me that there was any damage or risk of danger, that would be the end of my involvement. Or, and if the owner wasn't satisfied with that, they can do one of two things. They can file an appeal. They believe I made an error in my decision. They can hire an arborist or a forester to evaluate the tree and get a professional opinion about the risk of that tree falling.
And then we can go to court.
If the owner, after hearing from me that I don't see a danger, and they went and hired an arborist, and the arborist said there is indeed a very real danger of that tree falling, they would provide evidence to me of that in writing, which would then support an enforcement action,
Right, and then we go to court for
if
civil,
necessary. If it's
for
not,
civil issue.
yeah, well, there's several steps you have to go through. You have to file a violation notice. You give them time to comply. If they fail to comply, you have to come to the council to ask permission to go to court. So there's several steps you have to go through, and more often than not, when you go through the formal enforcement action, there's no need to take it to court because you can find other solutions to avoid having to go through that expense of paying attorneys and court fees. It's just like any other requirement of our town code. Those are the steps you have to go through. You start out asking for voluntary compliance. If it doesn't work, if it warrants going the extra step of formal violation, then you take that step and take that as far as you can.
Sue?
For the purposes of between neighbors, if you have a tree hanging over your house that belongs to the neighbor and you go see your neighbor and say, I think this is going to fall on my house, and they say, yeah, well, that's too bad. I do know that if you document by formally notifying your neighbor and providing a copy of that to your insurance company, that it gets subrogated out if something falls on your house and the damage gets repaired. Been there, got the T-shirt. But that's another civil recourse way that this.
I guess that's some of the heartburn that I have with it. I think we're trying to get involved in too much, and that's my opinion. If Peter and I are neighbors, if we don't get along, well, that's what I got a lawyer for. Okay, I don't have the town be my lawyer. Okay, because that costs the town money. Okay, it's my property. I have an issue with it. It should cost me money, not the town taxpayers. And that's my opinion.
Well, as you said, there's recourse within your insurance.
Right. I mean, there's way to deal with those issues without the town being involved in it. I think there's times that we don't have to be.
I understand your major concern with your neighbor's house, etc. But you're also saying public safety. I own a mile of road, and I got a lot of trees. And they could drop in the road at any time. And can you come out and tell me to cut that one, and that one? And you know what I'm saying? I mean, how do you know? I can show you a vine that fell last windstorm. It was healthy.
I think, and just from hearing things, and where we don't have it already, and I don't see it being some huge issue, and there are other recourses. Let's just take those out. Not put them in there. It's again, we have something that we've operated with for 18 years, and by adding some more things to it that I just don't see where we're having the concern that's out there. If we had a mass of trees out there that were falling on everybody's property and everything was happening, I'm sure we would have heard about before this. So, but let's take these things out. Just take them right out, and let's not deal with it. And
Hey, you talking about both section 614 and 615?
because the vegetated landscaping. And that was the one that and again, I think if we put in there unoccupied residences, because I think that was the major concern that we see is that we can take action against. Because if I haven't mowed my lawn for 3 weeks because I've been gone or I got a broken leg, I don't want to have the town coming to me and saying, hey, hire Billy up the road to come mow your lawn. Again, the intent of what we're trying to do is to fix these things, whether it's a multifamily residence that's not being cared for properly, abandoned property that's just falling into disrepair. I think if we just keep it broad enough where we can target those folks that we're concerned about and not put the onus back on the folks of the town that are really trying to do everything the right way. We're not having the issues with it there. So if we leave the vegetated one in there, but indicate that it's abandoned properties or unoccupied properties that we're truly trying to target, I think is what we're trying to get at with that.
And the uncared for, to the extent language in there, would take quite some time to reach that level. You just described not mowing your lawn for a few weeks. In that time period, there's no way your vegetation would grow to the extent that...
And again, I use that as a piss poor example. I'm sorry for my language.
It's definitely not a you got to mow your lawn kind of thing.
I understand it, but I also think that it's to the, again, I'm more concerned about the folks that aren't here taking care of their property than the folks that are living here trying to do the best that they can and not putting them to a point. Again, I think there's most people here don't see an issue with the folks that are living in town that have this. I think it's the folks that aren't here, that the towns that are dilapidated, the houses that are bad and gone and they're overgrown. Absolutely, let's hold those feet to the fire. But I don't think this rule needs to be in effect for occupied folks.
With an occupied home, an insurance company is likely to raise an issue if it's a fire hazard.
Right.
You would think,
If you put in unoccupied properties after compact area, it would...
And again, this is only in the compact areas where we're talking about. We're not talking about my house, Paul's house, anybody's house that lives out in the backwoods that want to...
Unoccupied, I don't know if it's the right word to use. I think...
I want the bushes to grow up around my house. I'm joking.
Well, say, and maybe unoccupied isn't the right word.
I would prefer the word abandoned.
Abandoned.
So, and that's what I was thinking was abandoned. And I'm trying to figure out... That's tough.
Abandoned isn't somebody went to Florida for...
Well, that's tough too, yeah, you're right.
I think we're hard pressed to enforce it. I mean, I know in my job, I've tried to get a hold of, we've had people with abandoned houses get trashed. I mean, like, no copper, and everything, and we can't get a hold of who owns it. You know, and that's the hard part we have. And I mean, how do we hold someone a lot, for it? I think that's a hard one. I agree with that one, the abandoned stuff, but that's going to be hard to enforce.
I think there are legal steps you
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we can just go to court, but it's going to be a pain.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
And as I said earlier, this is probably a section that's not going to be enforced that frequently because there aren't that many abandoned properties in the compact area that have reached the level of overgrown vegetation that you have a public safety risk. It's in here specifically because I had a complaint from a citizen who was concerned about the fact that their neighbor's property had been abandoned and been allowed to overgrown.
And absolutely, I think we ought to be able to have some way to take care of that. I don't want it to be the point where, like Mike said, my neighbors, I haven't mowed my lawn 3 weeks, they're going to call up and unfortunately, they're going to waste your time because it's not something enforceable, but you're going to get a call because they're mad at Mike for not mowing his lawn. And I think if we just specify that a little bit better, I think we're better off. And I don't know if you have the right word, Sue, which would go in there. Because abandoned, I don't know if it's the right word.
Unoccupied.
Well, unoccupied would need a period of time.
A time, whether it's more than 6 months or whatever the case is. Can we think about that word and maybe come back when we figure out what that word is? I don't know if we're going to solve that.
Means that they're not. Nobody's lived there.
They're not maintaining it in a way that somebody. Yeah. I think we all know what the word is. It's just trying to figure out what that word is.
Mr. Morrison, did you have something, sir?
Yes. How many people here think they could come up with, let's say tomorrow, enough money to put a new roof on the house? Rhetorical question.
Yeah.
I don't imagine anybody's going to reach in their pocket and say, yeah, I got it right here, no problem, If you do have it, you're probably not interested in putting it on your roof. Let's say a wind shear comes through here and rips about half the shingles off your roof. Okay? Now you've got to come up with money for it. In the meantime, you're going to throw a tap on there because you're not going to be sitting drinking your coffee with an umbrella over your head. It's just part of life. You're going to have to do something you don't want to leak in your house. But you call me up and I come in and I look at the roof and I say, 10 grand, I'll put a roof on it for you. No problem. But now you've got to come up with that. You're going to be able to come up with it in a month, 2 months, 6 months. It's going to take you a year. You're going to neglect the rest of your bills so you can put a roof on your house. I think these rules and regulations on people for the condition of the house is no more than bothering somebody else for the looks of it, or making the guy next door, his property isn't worth as much because your house is run down. I'm in a position right now where my health tells me I'm not going to be able to earn enough money over the course of the next year to put a new roof on my house. I need one, but I'm patching it with whatever I can find. It may not look like what you want it to look like, but I'm happy in that. I don't have to drink my coffee with an umbrella over my head.
And again, these have nothing to do with looks.
These rules are arbitrary. They're enforced and put on the people who can't afford to maintain their home like the Joneses. I think that, we're a pretty small town. We don't need to be pushing people around, having people have to abandon their homes, leave their homes because they can't afford to pay for anything.
Anything else?
Are you guys voting on this today?
Nope.
Okay.
Mike?
I got a question about the enforcement section. Is that brought forward, or is that all new?
No, that's brought forward.
Everything that's written in there is what was in the old one?
The enforcement section.
There's
some new added.
So 10.2 is added, just to clarify what a CEO has to do in order to enter a property to inspect for a nuisance condition. That's not clear in the current ordinance. 10.3 lists what content of a formal enforcement action needs to be. That's consistent with current requirements. 10.4, as I said earlier, the current provisions require notice sent by certified mail and U.S. fourth-class mail. The certified mail has been deleted. And 10.5, the one-time extension, that's current. 10.6, in order to vacate is current language. 10.6.1, in order to secure a dangerous property, that's current language. When I say current language, there might be rewording done, but the intent is still the same. 10.6.2 is out of current language, except, as I said earlier, the 5-day allowance has been taken out. Now, the time allowed is at the discretion of the code officer, depending on the severity of the issue. 10.6.3, the repaying all expenses, that's current. And 10.7 is not clearly addressed, but this reflects what is provided for by state law. The town council can indeed go to court. They actually can order, through council action, a building to be demolished, but there's also a provision where they can go to Superior Court and get a court order.
I didn't see any difference in the intent of what was written. I don't know if you had a question or concern, but would...
Well, to me, I was trying to find the old section, and it looked like a lot of added...
It was like Jeff said, and it truly does not change the intent, but it explains it a little bit better than...
What's this, like 10.6.3, okay? Can you actually charge somebody and call it a tax on their home if they don't pay a fee? I mean, because you could take homes away if they don't pay their taxes. So I don't know if you can even legally do that, can you? Doesn't it have to be a fine or something?
Sue, can you address that?
You mean if this is, the town has to have a judgment in order to do this, and it then can assess this, it's called a tax, against a property for the cost that the town incurred to clean up something that it was given a judgment to be able to clean up.
Okay, so you can call it a property tax then?
It becomes a part of your...
Because I know you can't take somebody's home away for not paying a fine, but I mean, you can take somebody's home away for not paying a tax.
This real estate taxes, yes.
Yeah.
This isn't a real estate tax.
Okay.
But it's assessed against your real property. It's like a lien against it, is what it becomes. But it's not a real estate lien, which has an expiration date that results in foreclosure.
Is ominous, for some people maybe. Maybe they don't agree with what you did, to clean up their property or whatever, and they don't want to pay that fee, and you've got to take them to, I should think it should be a separate thing, not something you can add on to their tax bill, and then say, well, you didn't pay your taxes, so, we're gonna foreclose your home,
This one doesn't result in a foreclosure kind of action. It's not a real estate.
But it has to be cleared out if you sold it.
That's correct.
Why do we take away the day someone gets to fix something? And then we leave it at your discretion.
The current language says, if the owner fails to secure the building or property within 5 days of receipt of said order, or when immediate action is required to protect public safety, the building inspector shall cause the building or property to be secured and shall take any other necessary protective measures, including but not limited to, there's an option there, either 5 days, or if immediate action is determined by the building inspector, then you need to take immediate action. So I didn't see a point in keeping both, because it's up to the discretion of the code officer if currently if 5 days is sufficient, or if you need to do something quicker than that. The same decision will be made under the current language. It could be 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, or whatever. The code officer felt was a reasonable time period to allow the owner to take corrective action.
Anything else? Yeah.
This one is 6374. Is that something that's accumulated from the other chapters? Is that
That's the 637, 2, 3, and 4 are proposed new languages, just to add clarity about what constitutes a adequate screening for trash receptacles.
What's in there right now?
6373 is basically the language that's in there now. Talking about must be designed and installed to resist damage from the force of wind and remain stable.
But this is in regard to waste containers.
Waste containers.
And specifically, waste containers that are on the Route 1 Main Street or are visible from the waterfront walkway.
is that listed in there that it's for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim, can you do me a favor? Do you have a red one? It has the red, what's changed?
The second piece of this shows what was in there originally.
So page 11 on is the all existing language that's in Chapter 5 now. And I've noted there what you find the provisions addressed in the proposed rewrite.
Perfect, thank you. I just want to be able to look through it again.
All right, we got a couple. Any other questions on this? Yep, in the back.
Yeah, just a clarification. I understand it. When my house trailer goes vacant and I don't get somebody back in it, I've got to get rid of it.
No.
Because it isn't lived.
No, it's.
Is it hooked up to plumbing and electric and all that?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a legally placed
Yeah, we're talking about ones that are just abandoned, that aren't hooked up, that are sitting out, that don't.
Well, that was illegal anyway.
What's that?
That was illegal.
Right, it was just transferred over.
Yeah, this was that.
One in town.
Correct, and that was just pulled over from the other. Yeah, so you have a trailer that's not being rented or not being lived in, as long as it's still.
Treated just like a house.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is, there was something about repurposing different pieces of machinery and stuff. I can't do that? I'm understanding it right?
I don't know which one you're talking about,
You
Bruce.
got
I forget what it was.
some junk, they said.
Some junk you can't repurpose?
Yeah, repurpose now. It's got to
Well, that was
be
written at the beginning.
original intent.
Yeah, what if somebody's an artist? I guess they can.
For example, I have got 4 or 5 275-gallon drums I cut in half so I can pick it up from my tractor and I put my eye in.
So those are serviceable. You're using it.
Yeah, but they're not being used for the original purpose.
But
That's a two-part requirement. The first part says that they're not maintained for their intended purpose and they're in a state of decay, a serious state of decay.
Right, yeah, it's
They're in decay, that's why they were taken out.
right, but you're, but, no one's gonna come take your.
I'm just saying, because I do a lot of that repurposing.
And I think somebody said, if you're an artist, you repurpose that stuff, it's still serviceable, it's being used for something else. This is, it's an old washing machine that's just absolutely 3 feet into the ground and just the top of the ringers are showing or something like that.
That's all right. Yeah, but
I don't know, 46 it is, all right.
that it's working its way into the ground.
Yeah.
A key word in that section is no accumulation. Accumulation is the key provision there. And that's not defined, it's not quantified what is meant by that, but it's a judgment call again.
But it's more than one and
Definitely more than one.
yeah.
The way I was interpreting it, like that caterpillar, I keep my tractor in.
Yeah. From where I sit up here,
Garage to me.
That's nowhere near.
this is, and again, it's interpretation. We got to have some trust in the folks that are doing the things here that it's not a junkyard. You know, we're not going to go. I've got pieces of machinery and stuff that are no longer in use, and they're sitting there, and they got flowers and stuff growing up. If it's truly washing machines and junk and trash and everything else that's out there, that's what I think we all are all understanding that, yeah, we got to take a look at it.
I've seen, not in this town, but in the past in other towns where one man's treasure is no man.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Thank you. All right, anything else on this? I think we've got some thoughts to talk about and some things to look at.
When is this going to come up by the council?
This is the first reading, but it's going to be passed to make sure that we have the changes that we've talked about tonight to come back into it, so we'll bring it back
You
again.
probably have more people here at a 7 o'clock meeting than you had at a...
And it'll be talked about at the 7 o'clock as a first reading. There's no action being taken on.
It's not on for first reading tonight because, to be perfectly honest, I didn't think we were going to get through the whole thing tonight. And it's going back to...
We're going to have revisions as we
It's
talked
going
about.
back to ordinance at the next, and then it will be on the council for the first reading, which is the introduction where people can...
Thank you.
June-ish.
May 31st, actually.
Thank you. All right. Beat that one enough? Perfect. Next, and everybody all set? Good. Subdivision ordinance amendments. Jeff. I'll just start with, we've got a proposed amendment to Appendix C subdivision ordinance to correct a conflict with the state subdivision law, to provide for the use of gravel roads, and to update phosphorus control measures. And we have amendments and the changes that you're talking about.
Yeah, so the first amendment actually is on the second page. I included the entire section just for informational purposes, but the change affects section 3.6. Leased dwelling units are not counted divisions if the planning board has determined the review requirements of Appendix K land use ordinance applicable to those units are at least as stringent as that required by subdivision law. There is similar language that used to be in the state statute for subdivisions, but it was removed. And now any subdivision is subject to planning board approval unless the municipality has been authorized by DEP to perform subdivision reviews, site plan reviews. So this is deleted from our subdivision ordinance to reflect the change in state law. Section 8.3, the section that deals with streets, this is language that was added as a result of a conversation I had with an owner of property out on Brewer Lake, accessed by Strickland Ridge Road and Old Winter Road. And he was contemplating do a small subdivision of lots that had short frontage on Brewer Lake. Currently, in our subdivision ordinance, when any road that's in a subdivision has to be paved. And he objected to having to do that, and possibly even having to pave the access roads, whether it comes in through Old Winter Road or Strickland Ridge Road. The planning board might be able to even ask him to pave those portions of the road to get to a subdivision. This language allows the use of it refers to as a mineral surface, but it's typically a gravel road. Does not intersect with a public way. And the example I'll give here is Strickland Ridge Road intersects with Bucks Mills Road, but the road that accesses this property intersects with Strickland Ridge Road. It does not intersect with a public road. He would like to be able to do a subdivision off that road and not have to pave that road. So this language here would allow that to happen. And there are other places around town, too, where you might conceivably have a road that intersects with a private dirt road, and a subdivision is proposed on that road.
Would it also allow a paved road into a subdivision and then gravel roads off from that?
For what purpose?
For making a subdivision, you have the road going into the subdivision, but then you have other streets going off that main road. So you have a road going into a cul-de-sac, say, but then you have other roads that are now shooting off that road.
Well, the first section we're talking about deals with the use of a proposed street, not an existing street, so that doesn't intersect with a town road.
Okay.
So,
But, Jeff, why does it need to, what's the difference if it intersects with a public road?
well, because there's no change proposed in this ordinance to not require pavement for a proposed subdivision street that intersects with a town road. Royal Ridge is an example. That's a subdivision street that intersects with Central Street.
Yep.
That was required to be paved. That requirement will continue in this ordinance. The changes does not affect that. If you're going to build a street for a subdivision that intersects with a town road, you have to pave it.
So where Royal Ridge is now a town road, any road coming off from that has to be paved.
If it's for subdivision purposes, I would say yes. Yeah.
But we've talked before, can't we allow subdivision roads on a gravel road, on a private gravel road?
There's no exception currently.
That's what we're trying to fix
No
here.
exception currently in our ordinance that allows the planning board to waive asphalt.
Well, why can't we, if we're making changes to
Why don't we
this,
do
why
that?
can't we make that change also?
Well, you're doing it in effect, but it's not a blank waiver. It deals specifically with proposed roads that don't intersect with public roads and existing gravel roads that are proposed to access a subdivision. So,
Yeah, but can't we take it one step further and say we'll allow ones that intersect? If we want development?
if you're looking for the possibility that every subdivision coming down the pike from now on is going to have just a gravel road, then that's the change.
My concern with that, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, is what we've talked about with the other one, with public safety access. If you don't have, by having that paved road, it gives you a little better access into the subdivision from there. If it's a gravel road to start, sometimes,
Yeah, but you can make the gravel road to town standards.
Sure you can.
And that's what this language clarifies. It clarifies that the second section says the board may approve the use of an existing private road finished with a mineral surface to provide access to proposed subdivision, provided that the road is improved to the extent necessary to comply with the requirements of Chapter 10 Roads and Streets, and to comply with an approved stormwater management plan for the subdivision. So I'll use Strickland Ridge Road as an example. If somebody wanted to put lots on Strickland Ridge Road, create a subdivision, then that language would allow Strickland Ridge Road to remain a gravel road, but it would need to be improved if necessary to bring it up to town standards.
So let's go back to Royal Ridge. So if Royal Ridge wanted to expand and he wanted to run another road, say he had another 30 acres, wanted to run another road out there, that would have to be paved.
Yes.
Why can't we make this so it's all, I think it's what we're looking at, is that we can make that a gravel road to town standards in that existing subdivision? Because we're saying we can do it now for all new subdivisions, is the way I'm reading this, correct?
No, not if they intersect with the town road.
All new subdivisions intersect with a town road has to be paved.
If you're building a road, yes, that intersects with the town road, as it's currently provided for, you have to pave that road.
Even if it's a private road? Because
Yeah,
I understand that.
Subdivision road.
that's the way we do it now. You have to do it to town standards of pavement.
Royal Ridge was a private road till we took it over.
That's right.
And I'm saying, why can't we do subdivisions on private roads built to town standards with gravel as opposed to pavement? Because nobody's going to make any money if they've got to put pavement on there, and it's going to prevent
This
them from
language
doing it.
allows that.
But not on a public road, not back to a public road.
Well, yes, it does, yeah.
Okay.
See, that's where I was
Okay.
confused, because I think it does. That's the way I understand it. I think
If
we're on the
it's
same page, it's just listen to what it says.
The second provision deals with existing private roads, whether they intersect with a town road or not.
Yeah, but then what if you want to build a new road?
If that new road intersects with a town road, it needs to be paved. The scenario that I'm talking about is deal with in section 8311, where
Existing
you
gravel.
have a proposed street that intersects with a private road, not a public road. And this section would allow that proposed street to be surfaced with gravel and not be paved.
But, I mean, like, in the past 10 years, most of the subdivisions we've seen in this town have been 200 feet on a paved road, because that's the way nobody's going to develop in behind there. And it would seem like the way you're going to get them to develop in behind there is to allow a gravel road.
You know, if I got 100 acres on Jacob Ark, which I don't, wish I did, and I want to put a subdivision on there, I got to build a pavement road.
You can't make any money.
If it intersects with Jacob Buck Pond Road, yes, you have to pave that road.
Well, yeah, my subdivision road's going to be better than the main road.
Real big, yes.
I know.
So I think what we're looking at is to say, if we're going to build a subdivision, regardless of where it is, it's allowed to have a gravel road.
To town standards. That's what I think we should allow,
So, yeah,
to
so if
encourage
that's
development.
your preference, if you want to be able to, the planning board to be able to say, or the ordinance can say that, no payments required, period. And let that decision be made by the subdivision developer, if they want that road to be accepted by the town.
As long as I understand that to be accepted by the town, it would need to be paved. It would need to be constructed to town standards, and it would need to be paved.
For us,
And that's reasonable.
for us to maintain it.
That if the
Yes.
town were to accept it.
Yes,
And that's fair.
but
right?
just to have a subdivision.
I think it just encourages you to develop on a road, because that's the only place you're going to do it, and all the backland just sits there.
So if I understand you correctly, what you'd like this ordinance to say is that a subdivision road, whether it's on an existing gravel road or a new proposed road. I'm having trouble talking.
Guys, gonna keep it down, please.
Whether it's if the subdivision is proposed on an existing gravel road or a newly constructed gravel road, no pavement's required. Unless the subdeveloper would like the road to be taken by the town, then the road would need to be built to town standards, but only as far as gravel.
Correct. I guess my language is any new subdivision being proposed only needs to have a gravel road built to town standards, and if they want the town to maintain the road, then it needs to be paved to town standards, I guess is the word.
Yeah, it's an unaccepted road unless paved.
And some people won't mind a private road that's gravel.
No.
A lot of communities have subdivisions like that.
Most of the ones that are off the beaten path that are...
Because otherwise, everybody's going to looking for a gravel road to tie into.
Interesting that I have a list of roads that dead end, and I got this. I asked Jay for it because I was looking at the problems that we have to back out of a lot of roads that dead end with no turnaround, because there's no turnaround and fewer and fewer people want you turning on their property. And so I asked for a list of, and you're exactly right, we have these straight things that go into dead ends and stop and don't provide a turnaround. I need to look at what
Couldn't we make a requirement that you have to have a cul-de-sac if there's going to be a dead end?
there needs to be something, or maybe this will help to, but
Spur some
we
development.
have
That's what I would say.
we have like 20 that dead end that the Public Works is
That we-
backing out
that
or
we
turning
maintain
it.
and
That's
go to-
correct.
Like
These are
Kenny
public
Drive
roads.
and all those.
And so that's an offshoot. of
So you understand what we're
you're
looking
talking
at?
about, all these things that just go and stop.
Yeah.
So I think the proposed language here doesn't need to be in there. This can be addressed in section 831 in the existing ordinance. Proposed streets must comply with the requirements of chapter 10 roads and streets, except for asphalt paving.
Yeah, I mean, because you already had the requirements in there for a subdivision road. We just pull out the need to be asphalt paved.
Well, from Sue's concern, it sounds like we maybe need to address it. Needs to have an entrance and an exit, or a
Or
cul-de-sac.
a cul-de-sac. Definitely, I think
To
that
make-
Are
would.
those subdivisions? Is that what those are too? Those are approved subdivisions?
They're old subdivisions, like
Yeah.
Kenny Drive, where it just went to a dead end and there's
Okay.
nowhere to turn around.
Okay.
That if they're, in the creation of a street, either has to be a through street or has to have a cul-de-sac.
Right, so chapter 10 actually includes a requirement for a T-turn,
Okay.
turnaround, or, so that would need to be met on a proposed subdivision street.
Yeah. That would make
And
sense.
maybe with these other ones now, if the rules are backed off a little bit, maybe they'll develop a little bit or do something. Or
Yeah, well, I told now that I've got the list, I'm looking at what the town accepted, and if there's room at the end, I may be coming back with a proposal that
To do that.
we put some Ts or turnarounds, just so that we're not backing in or driving over private property.
So I get the gist of what you want to, then I'll come back with you with some new language.
Please.
The last change deals with just simply updating the manual that deals with stormwater management. It refers now to a manual that was revised last in September 1992.
Right.
There's one now from 2011, so that's...
And looking at the numbers didn't change up or anything.
No,
It's
the numbers didn't
it's just
change at
changing
all.
what it is, okay. All right, Jeff, we're going to stop there. I think people need to take a break before we get going for the meeting. Appreciate it. We'll come back with the fees and Appendix K changes, and I think the other Chapter 13 stuff we'll make sure we schedule that for the next meeting. So we'll bring that ordinance, Chapter 13, back up again at our next meeting on the 31st. So.
The change on Appendix K, by the way, is on the agenda, but it's currently it's going through the planning board review process right now. They're going to hold a public hearing. They've done their first reading. They're going to hold a public hearing at their next meeting in June.
Okay.
And you're certainly welcome to attend and listen to the discussion about the changes there. As you may recall, with the charter change now, recommendations for amendments to Appendix K go directly to the town council from the planning board.
All right, we'll take a adjournment.
Motion.